Okay, people. So I am joined by Jim. We going with the French pronunciation, Jim, or just the bog standard English?
Bog standard English, go for it.
Okay, we're Jim Piddock,
Yeah,
actor, writer, producer, man of many hats.
yeah.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate you
You're
stopping by.
welcome. Yeah, people say, how do you pronounce it in America? I go, it's Piddock in English, it's Piddock in America, but most people just call me shithead, So that's however you want to pronounce it.
So, yeah, you're here promoting your new book, right?
Yes, my first book. I've written lots of screenplays and lots of television shows, and this was a very different experience.
Yeah, so Caught with Your Pants Down and Other Tales from Hollywood.
Yes, from a life in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's listen, I started out to write this as a fun kind of jaunty, irreverent romp through my 4 decades in Hollywood and other aspects of show business in New York theatre. And then as it sort of came out, it sort of had a slightly deeper philosophical thing come through, which I was kind of pleasantly surprised by, and people seem to be responding to. I certainly didn't write it as a self-help book or a philosophy tome, but it kind of the sort of themes suddenly started popping up of a sort of search for family and what family means, and the importance of making choices every second of every day of your life, and what that means and how that will impact who you are and what your destiny is. So amidst all the fart and poo stories, there's that.
Yeah, so there's at the beginning you talk about how it came from you doing a Q&A,
Yeah.
right? So how did that come about?
Well, the
Like,
Screen Actors Guild asked me to do this evening called Inside the Industry, Let's Talk About It. And I was interviewed by a Wall Street Journal reporter for about 45, it was supposed to be 45 minutes, in a 200-seat theatre in Beverly Hills. And I don't know why, I think I was quite busy at the time. I didn't really prepare anything, but I thought I'll just tell some stories. I've got a lot of fun stories and sort of stupid stories at my expense in show business that have some sort of bearing on people who are either interested in the business or in the business. And so I went, and we had a really good time, and I think we went well over an hour, and then another half hour of Q&A. And I came away thinking I really, really enjoyed that, and the audience seemed to really love it. And I hadn't done any theatre for, God, probably 12 years. And I thought maybe I will sort of, take a break from film and TV and do this as a one-man show. And I started writing it as that. And then after a very short space of time, I realized I had about a 10-hour-long show, which was not going to fly for an audience or me. So then I thought, well, it's probably a book, and I'll maybe distill that down and do a show later at some point in my life if I can still waddle around a stage. And then the pandemic hit, and I had what would have probably taken me 5 years, took me 5 months to write.
So what was the difference for you from, because you've written a whole host of things for the screen. Yeah. So what was it like making that transition from writing that stuff to writing a book?
It's hard. I mean, I really came away with a newfound admiration for novelists and writers that write books. First of all, it takes you way longer. And secondly, writing screenplays and television is a craft more than anything. Writing books, you're a real writer if you can write a decent book. And I knew I could write. I knew that much. And I try and keep the book conversational, and it's the way I speak mostly. So there's quite a bit of swearing in it. Now, not a lot, but there's some. It's just the way I would pepper my normal conversation. And I think it was hard from the aspect that I generally look forwards or right in front of me or forwards in my life. And it was weird looking over my shoulder at the past. I mean, I was in my 60s by then, when the pandemic hit, and so it's actually quite good timing because we kind of race through life at a million miles an hour, and it's not terrible to get off the merry-go-round every so often and have a look around at what's really you don't have time to see normally. And so it was really good from that aspect, and you can assess what your life has been or means, and whether it has any value, and whether you've got anything fun to pass on to people in an entertaining way. And that was a real key for me, because I didn't think that anyone was particularly interested in hearing the Jim Piddock story, because I'm not particularly interested in hearing it. But I did think they would be interested in my kind of take on how I've navigated through the turbulent waters of Hollywood and Broadway and various other things in life. It's not all about show business, and that I wanted the book to appeal to everyone, as opposed to, as one writes a film, you don't just write it for people that like horses or people who like football or whatever. You write it for a broad audience, and even if the subject matter is a narrow scope, you try and make it as universal as possible. So I was quite rigid and strict. If a story or a chapter, I think it's 38 chapters in the book and an introduction, and a foreplay by Eric Idle, as opposed to a forward. I think there's not a chapter in there that doesn't have a story or an anecdote that doesn't have some value as for the reader. Otherwise, it just would be, and then I did this, and then I was in this film, and then I wrote that film, and that's dull to me. That's boring. And the same thing, I didn't linger on my childhood or who my parents or grandparents and all that was. I mean, I've skipped through it if there was a good story, and there are some good stories early on, particularly because I discovered my grandfather worked with Charlie Chaplin, and I had no idea he was even an actor. So there was all those sort of things that came out. So yeah, I think and hope, and it seems to be a book for everybody, which is lovely. And I was interviewed last week by a guy who'd spent 20 years in the US military and had nothing to do with show business, and we share similar political viewpoints, and that's about it. But he said he totally related to it, and it was as a book about life. And I found that very, very heartily encouraging, because otherwise, this is a guy from Brooklyn who's diametrically opposed to me, and you'd think you'd put us together and go, what would these two people have to talk about? And it was really exciting. It was really exciting to kind of get that feedback and we ended up having an hour and a half kind of podcast conversation. It was fantastic.
Oh, that's great, man.
Yeah.
What kind of, when you were doing that looking back on life kind of thing, were there incidents where you think, oh man, I should have done that, and made you reach out to people and revisit things?
Some. I mean, a lot of the stories are at my expense. Things I've done that were ridiculously stupid, and what I learned from it or didn't learn from it. I mean, caught with my pants down comes from an incident where I literally got caught in public with my pants down, and I mean not just in the American sense of pants, trousers, underpants. So a British audience know exactly what I mean there. So, and it didn't happen once. It happened 3 times in my life. Once in England, once in LA, and once in the south of France. And someone asked me, they said, didn't you learn from the first time? And all I could say was evidently not. And then I realized also that the title was a kind of a metaphor for my life, and for what we all go through in life, is that we all get caught with our pants down, whether we like it or not. And often in amusing situations. These were not criminal situations; they were amusing situations. I hasten to add. So I think that's where the title came from, and that's where I kind of felt there were lessons to be learned. But no, I think my conclusion, without giving too much away in the book, is that I feel like I've taken risks in certain areas. I'm not a risk taker physically because I'm a coward. But and I'm not really a risk taker with money. I've been very prudent and sort of sensible. I'm very conservative in terms of how I build my money. And so I think that the risks I took were creatively and career-wise. I mean, I left England at the age of 24 with $100 in my pocket. After starting a career, I worked for a couple of years in repertory theatre in England, and I didn't intend to stay in America. I was offered a job teaching and directing for 3 months. I thought it'd be nice just to get away after my father had died and stuff was going on. So it kind of, the conclusion is again that everything is, you're just making these choices every minute of every second of every day of your life, and that's what defines you. And I think people, it's not an original thought that I'm just expressing there, but I think I do kind of express it in the book in a way that may be a little unique because it's from my perspective. But that I don't, I know it sounds awful, but people say, do you have major regrets? I have regrets when things went wrong, but I don't have regrets that they did go wrong, in the sense that, that's how it happened, and those reasons why it happened. I mean, there are awful things that happened that I talk about in the book, that impacted me in various ways, but that they all add up to who you are, and it's how you respond to those things and how you deal with them. I mean, I didn't intend to get divorced, with a 9-year-old daughter. That broke my heart that I did that and had to do it, because a situation that had been wonderful had turned not so wonderful. So, those are things that you go, well, I wish it hadn't turned out that way. But on the other hand, it did, and my life is richer because of it in many ways. And I think the harm done was minimized and the good done was maximized. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, of course, because I think sometimes you can think to yourself, oh man, I wish that was different. But then it's like, wait, but if that wasn't there, who would I be now? Right?
Exactly.
All these things shape us, and mold us into who we are in this present moment in time. So you take one of those things away, what are you left with now? You know what I mean?
I mean, we all wish we could be more successful or more wealthy or more famous or whatever we wish for. But the reality is, you and your destiny you do have control, and you are meant to live the life you lead. And if you're not living the life you lead, that's your problem, and you've got to sort it out. And that sounds harsh, but I mean, I know many people who have come from horrendous backgrounds and situations, who have beaten the odds, and only because they just said, their personality led them to do that, or their choices more than their personality. And I don't want to get preachy, and I'm already sounding preachy, so it's too late. But I do think that's important. And yeah, sure, there are things that I'd love to have become, even better known than I am. But on the other hand, I write a chapter called "I Know You From Somewhere," where my life, I have just enough ego stroking by people saying, "Oh, I loved you in something," and coming up to me and saying, I really enjoyed you in this, or I know you from somewhere. Do you have kids at such a school, or do you work in the hardware store, or whatever it is? And then get into a conversation there. So I know a lot of people that are rich and famous, and they always say, the wealth I can take, the fame I would get rid of in a second. They all hate it. And I'm in that lucky situation where I have just enough to make me feel good and feel that what I do has actually impacted a few people's lives, and I entertain people in some way. But it doesn't, I don't get bothered. I don't have people coming up to me and disturbing my meals or whatever. I just don't say, oh, hi, they wave and whatever. And I don't know them, but they sort of, whatever. So I think that again, I don't know how I'd have handled fame at an early age. It can really, or even at a late age, it could really destroy some people's lives.
Oh yeah, I mean, we've seen countless child actors just be destroyed by it all, which is, it's always a shame. But you kind of wonder, like, what's in place to give people the tools to understand how to deal with this. But you wonder that about so many different things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, I think, one point in the book when I was at a particular low point in my career, and I had a couple of big highs. I'd sort of starred on Broadway and stuff, and then I came to LA and was struggling, to get work in TV and film at the beginning, and then finally I broke in. But I remember saying I experienced the first pangs of extreme professional jealousy, which I think we all do. Jealousy is a human emotion. It's a horrible one, but it's a human emotion, and we all experience it on some level, unless we're saints, and I certainly am not. And so there was this time when I felt, here are these actors that were my peers in New York, or even came to me to ask how to do things, and looked up to me, and now they're on hit TV shows, or they're starring in movies, and they've been thrown into the limelight, and they're in the tabloids every week. And then I kind of, now with the hindsight, I talk about this, how 40 years later, I look at those people, and very, very few of them I would be envious of now. A lot of them have, fallen foul of, their careers have fallen apart. they've lost all their money, they've had terrible health problems. Some of them have died. Some of them had dreadful drug problems or alcoholism, all of which, touch wood, I have avoided. And so you go, who's the lucky guy now? You know, I mean, you can't measure your life against other people's. You can only measure it against your own standards and what you want. So that's again, it's sort of, yes, I wish certain things had happened here or there or whatever, but you know, je ne regrette rien. I mean, I don't regret anything really, and that sounds arrogant. And people say anyone who says I don't have any regrets is lying. But honestly, yeah, I have regrets on certain bad behavior if it's on my behalf, and I have regrets that certain things happen to me, which is bad behavior on other people's behalf. But no, I mean, it's what happened.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you had taken that theatre directorship up, you know what I mean, at the very start, things would have been completely different, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a gamble. Each time it was a gamble. And you go, sometimes you have big choices to make in your life. You come to a major fork in the road. And other times they're little ones, you know, tiny ones, but they make a difference. I mean, us talking, it's a choice. You made a choice to ask me, I'll be on the show. I made a choice to say, yes, I'd love to be on the show. The things I've talked about, I've made a choice. You know, I've been much more serious talking to you than I have in a lot of other interviews. That's a choice. And people listening to this have the choice to either be, to go, he sounds like an asshole, or you know, that sounds like fun read, or that sounds interesting, and I'd like to do that. So who knows what effect you have on other people's lives? Each little stone is, you know, goes in the water and creates ripples. And that's enough of the metaphors for now. I'm going to start talking about the fart and poo stories in the book.
Hey, well, one thing I'm going to ask you about, Jim, because I was just like, yo, what are you doing? Right? When you talk about the wedding shop incident, because like you're just like, oh, I can't look at her. But at that point, she'd already been married. So like, why did you feel such a way?
I don't know. I mean, that chapter is totally at my expense. It's called A Coward and an Idiot. And that was, I mean, for context of people listening, I was buying a wedding ring for my, for the woman I was marrying at the time. And in this massive shopping mall kind of thing in LA, and it was totally empty. It was a Monday afternoon. And as I'm buying it, my ex was an actress called Linda Kozlowski, who I had lived with in New York, who was, people know from Crocodile Dundee. And the reason we'd broken up was that I didn't want to get married. She did. And I couldn't believe the bizarre coincidence that she would come in at this moment when my wife-to-be, my mother, and my sister-in-law were all there, who she had met many times. So, and I just like turned my back and thought, I'm just going to, what do? Do I just be a man and say hi, or do I be a mouse, a coward, and try and hide? And I chose the latter. And I got, then the woman behind the counter went, this credit card is a bit faded. Is it Piddock? Is it Piddock? And I was like, oh, yes, shut up. And then my sister-in-law, who hadn't seen my ex-girlfriend, went, so Jim, when do you think that the marriage, you know, well, she said, so do you think that you're ready for the wedding? And it was just one thing after another. And in the end, I just kind of, I literally sloped out of that store as quickly as I could without ever confronting the situation. It was shameful. It was shameful.
I mean, if it happened a month after you telling her, I don't want to get married, I could understand. But
absolutely. I mean, it was just bizarre. I mean, it was so odd. It was such an odd thing to happen in so many ways. I mean, there's a number of really strange coincidences in the book that do make you wonder, is there some puppet master somewhere playing, you know, taking the piss out of us and putting us together to collide at certain moments? I have no idea, but it makes you ask those questions.
Yeah, that one definitely made. But I will say, with the whole toilet thing and the lock, that did confound me at one point, but luckily I did not have my trousers around my ankles.
Yes. I think that's a relatable story, but very few people have actually been caught and been really caught in a horrendous way. So yeah. But as I say, listen, the book, if nothing else, is brutally honest about myself, my shortcomings, and that wasn't a shortcoming necessarily. And there's one chapter where I start out saying, here are 10 A-list actors, 9 I loved, and I'll tell you why, and 1 I thought was a 4 asterisks, and you can substitute whatever word you like for the 4 asterisks. And I then proceed to do it, and I don't do it in a mean way at all, and I explain why I like these people, and I rehabilitate some of those, because there are a lot of candidates for the 4 asterisks. Some of them are people who have notoriously bad reputations, and I say that in my experience they did this, this, and this, and I thought they were terrific. And then when I come to the person by default who is the 4 asterisks, I really let them have it. I don't hold back, and they're very well known, and I don't care, because I've earned the right. If I'm going to be this honest with myself, I'm now in my 60s. I've worked for 44 years in show business. I've earned the right to speak my mind and call out bad behavior, as I think we all do in any field. And I do it on sets. If I see someone not behaving correctly or being rude to people, I quietly take them aside and say, look, it's just not, you can't do that. It's not productive. It's not going to get the best out of people. And I feel I've earned that right. And no one seems to tell me to shut up, which is good. And obviously, when you're in your 20s, you wouldn't be quite so bold, because you go, well, I'm never going to work again. But in my 20s, I would have had nothing to write about anyway, so it's a moot point. But I do think that's important, and I think that one has a responsibility to call out bad behaviour, and not, again, in a mean way, in a humorous way if you can, and in a way that's sort of like, why would you do that? It's not correct. And by the way, if I have ever behaved badly, I would hope people would call me out on it.
No, I feel that's a fair thing to do.
Yeah.
But because as you said earlier, right, there is, you do swear in the book, which is fine, but then other times you do the 4 asterisks, or sometimes you'll mention someone's name and other times you don't, right? So what made you make, like, when you're doing that, where do you go, actually I'm not going to use the name here?
That's a really good question, because mostly I do name and shame, and that's why the book's getting quite a bit of attention, because most memoirs don't. And I only didn't do it when I felt that it was more harm than good. There was one incident where there was a studio executive who was a very big drug addict, and his behavior was awful, and I give him a pseudonym in the story and explain what he did. And I think that's correct, because I've no idea whether this was a long time ago, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know whether he's cleaned himself out. I know he was in rehab the last I heard. And I feel there's nothing to be gained by that. And it's a long time ago. And that may be in someone's distant past. So that I felt was one. And there was another story, I think, that a director who I don't name by name, and because he does so much good work, and it was really just a slightly, it wasn't a terrible thing he did. It was just sort of slightly, oblivious. And so I thought that was not right. And I took a story out of the book of a very major star who behaved really badly at a dinner party that I held. And I sort of kind of got my own back during the dinner party. But I took the story out because I remembered that she had written a very long apologetic letter afterwards.
Right.
Apologizing for her behavior. And without any prompting. And I thought, you know what? That no harm, no foul. That's fair game, and I have no right to dig that story up. That just becomes cheap name dropping. And by the way, there's a lot of shameless name dropping in this book.
Oh yeah. You go hog wild on that front, Jim.
I feel a name dropping for England, that chapter. But I think people enjoy that. If it's not just sort of, look at me, I'm so big because I know all these people. I don't need to do that. That is my life. I spend my entire life socializing or working with major stars and minor stars and people like me. So I have you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think that's what people want. Give the people what they want.
Indeed, indeed. And talking about giving the people what they want, right? So you've got a new film that is going in production for Netflix. Is that correct? Frankel? Is it Frankel?
No, it's not Netflix. It's an independent movie. Yeah, it's called Frankel, about the horse. Frankel. It's sort of an English sea biscuit type story. Fantastic story. Jeremy Irons going to play Sir Henry Cecil, who was the horse's trainer. So that's supposed to be shooting in the summer. The Netflix thing, that was a film I did with Christopher Guest called Mascots. That was a film that I wrote with Chris, and he and I both started, and we produced as well, and Chris directed it. So yeah, that was a few years ago. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, like, are you enjoying the writing, producing more than the acting, starring in things, or is it just like that transitional period where you'll do one and then you'll go back to the other?
Yeah, I tend to flip backwards and forwards. I mean, certain years I do more writing and producing, and other years I do more acting. I think if people say, you know, I'm often asked, you know, if you had to choose, which would you choose? And I say, look, if someone held a gun to my head, which thankfully has never happened in my life, I would say acting, because that was my first love and that I enjoy that. And it's easier. It's easier. You know, I just show up, I learn my lines, and, you know, theatre's a whole different animal. That was kind of hard work. But TV and film, you know, you learn your lines, you get a million takes if you need it, usually. And so it's kind of almost like a vacation now when I go and act from the hard work of writing.
And you're learning to write more roles for yourself when you do these things.
I've got to start that. I mean, you know, I talked to Jason Segel about that, who there's a casual name drop. And Jason, you know, was an actor and then became a writer and a director as well. And he said his entire acting career would never have happened unless he'd written himself great parts. And I just have never done that. They are two very separate parts of my brain, and I write what I want to write. And then I get to the point where we're sort of casting it, and I go, oh, what can I play? Like a couple of scenes. And then I end up doing that or not. There was a movie called Tooth Fairy, which a lot of people have seen, and I wanted to be in that because it had Stephen Merchant and Julie Andrews and The Rock obviously in it, and various other people, Billy Crystal. And I said to Fox, I said, can't I just play one of the old British, you know, fairies in this? And they said, no. In fact, no. Sorry, I didn't. I said I want to be in the movie, and I could be one of the people in Fairyland. And they said, no, we've already got too many old British fairies in the movie. And my response was, that's 3 lawsuits right there, matey. That's 3 discrimination lawsuits, old British fairy. But they still didn't bend, so I never was in the movie.
So the interesting thing I was thinking about with that one, because you wrote the story for Tooth Fairy, not the script.
I did, yeah. I wrote the story, and that was kind of that was an interesting choice, because I didn't want to write the actual screenplay. I'd sort of decided that I'd sort of been in all sorts of. I'd written those types of movies, and I didn't feel like I needed to do another one. And I wanted to write something else at that time. So I said to the producer, look, I'll write the whole outline for the movie and I'll produce it with you, but we'll find some good writers who can do big studio movies, you know, family movies. And we did. We found Lau Gantz and Babalu Mandel, who've done 1 million big Hollywood family movies. And that was a smart choice because they did a great job. And then we had Randy Mayhem Singer come in to do a rewrite, and that was good. Now I have to say, I've got to go.
Yes, I was just seeing that now,
and I apologize, but that is the story of my life right now, and I have to give the BBC a bit of time. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I apologize to have to jump off, and I usually give people as much as they need.
Yeah, no problem. Just before you quickly go, Jim, just let people know where they can follow you.
Yes, jimpiddock.com is my website, at Real Jim Piddock on Twitter, and at Jim Piddock on Instagram. So you can find me at any of those places. And if you look like you're not a serial killer, you'll probably be, inducted into the cult. And, please buy the book, because I didn't mention that all the proceeds that I received from the book are going to 3 different charities. So including one for Ukrainian refugees. So I will not be making a cent or a penny out of this movie, out of this book. So yeah, if not for it, I have my call. This is the BBC calling. It's been lovely.
You go. Take care. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.